The snow fell in heavy sheets, swallowing the town in white silence, though silence had long been the language of Adelina Cross. Her father's hand, thick and calloused from whiskey bottles more than labor, clamped around her arm as he dragged her into the street. The cold bit at her exposed fingers, her breath rising like pale smoke, but the sharper wound was the soundless violence in his grip. He reeled like a bear, fat and furious, his boots crunching through the frost. Men and women paused in doorways, their shawls and coats pulled tight, their eyes already curdled with judgment. "She's deaf, take her." Thomas Cross's voice cracked through the winter air, slurring, soaked in liquor. The words burned worse than any whip, louder than any storm. He shoved her forward as though she were nothing more than broken stock. Adelina stumbled into the snow, her dark hair falling loose from its braid, her prairie dress already soaked at the hem. Her ears caught only fragments, the vibration of his shout, the shape of his mouth twisting, the tremor of laughter from the gathered men. She could not hear all of it, but she felt every ounce of shame. Her father's face was red, his beard ragged with neglect. His eyes darted like a man ashamed of himself but too proud to admit it. He lifted his bottle in mock offering, as though selling her to the street. The bystanders chuckled, and their chuckles cut like blades. A woman tugged her child closer, as if deafness were contagion. Adelina's lips parted, but no sound came. She did not try to speak. Experience had taught her what it brought: ridicule, correction, the rolling of eyes. Instead she stood still in the snow, her hands curled into fists at her side, the whiteness covering her like a burial shroud. Then the murmuring parted. From the edge of the street, where the snow drifted thickest, a figure emerged. Shirtless despite the storm, long black hair unbound, scars tracing his chest like maps of battles past, he walked with the quiet assurance of a man who did not need words. Nakai Redhawk, the Apache giant. His steps made no hurry, but each carried a weight that silenced the crowd more thoroughly than any sheriff's shout. The wind howled between buildings, tugging at cloaks and skirts, but Nakai did not flinch. He stopped before Adelina, his breath steady, his eyes dark and steady as a mountain shadow. He looked at her not as broken, not as shameful, but as if she were whole, as if he had already known her pain. Thomas laughed bitterly, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Take her, savage. She's no use to me, can't hear a word. A curse on a man's house, that one." He spat into the snow, his spit turning pink in the frost. Adelina wanted to sink, to vanish beneath the snow, to dissolve into the whiteness and never return. But Nakai's gaze held her, rooted her in place. He knelt slowly, his great frame folding down until his eyes were level with hers. The world around them blurred. The jeers, the flurry of snow, the stink of whiskey. All that remained was the warmth of his presence. He leaned near, close enough that his breath brushed against her cheek, close enough that the crowd could not hear. His lips shaped words with patient clarity, spoken so low only she could catch them. "I know you can hear," he whispered. Not with ears, but with something deeper. Her chest tightened, her throat caught. She had lived her life measured by what she could not hear, by what she lacked. Yet in that moment, his words struck through the snow like fire. He named not her absence, but her presence. Her hearing was not silence, but a different way of listening. The townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. Martha Dillard, the midwife, clucked her tongue. "He'll ruin her sure," she hissed, but her words faltered. For the first time, Adelina did not drop her gaze. Nakai rose slowly, placing himself between Adelina and her father. His broad back bore scars that caught the snow like chalk on stone. He did not raise a weapon. His silence was enough. Thomas muttered curses, but his feet faltered, dragging him back toward the saloon, where lamps glowed through frosted windows. Adelina's knees trembled, though she fought to still them. She had been left in the snow before, left to fend, left to ache, but this leaving felt different. Her father's absence, cruel as it was, unchained something inside her. Yet what replaced it was no kinder. The sharp eyes of the town, their whispers swirling with the storm. Nakai extended his hand, palm open, not command but invitation. She hesitated, watching the strength in his fingers, the patience in his posture. Snow dusted his hair, clung to the fur belt around his waist. Against the white storm, he was a figure carved of night and earth. She placed her hand lightly in his, and warmth spread up her arm like dawn through frost. The murmurs grew. Taken by a savage. What shame! Poor fool girl. Adelina caught their lips moving, their faces curdling. Each judgment pressed down like weight on her shoulders. But Nakai's grip did not tighten. He held her hand as though it were delicate glass, and she found she could breathe. Together they stepped through the falling snow, his frame shielding her from the worst of the wind. The town behind them did not move, save for eyes tracking their path, their condemnation left hanging in the cold. Adelina's heart pounded with terror, but beneath it ran something steadier, a current of wonder, of possibility. Her father's last words still burned. "She's deaf, take her." But another voice echoed louder now. A whisper, gentler than snowfall, strong enough to shake her world. "I know you can hear." The storm closed around them as they walked. The snow deepened. The murmurs faded into distance. For the first time in her life, Adelina did not feel entirely alone. Yet even as warmth stirred in her chest, she knew this was only the beginning. For the eyes of the town would not forgive, and shame does not melt as quickly as snow. Still, his hand remained around hers, steady as stone, leading her toward an unknown cabin, an unknown fate. She felt the faint vibration of his steps through the frozen ground, each one carrying her farther from the cruel echo of her father's voice. She followed, trembling, yet unwilling to let go. The wind rose once more, swirling fierce around them. Nakai leaned close. His voice carried not for the crowd, but only for her heart. "You will learn to listen," he said softly. And though her ears caught nothing but the storm, she felt the truth of it move through her like fire hidden beneath snow. The snowstorm swallowed the town behind them, leaving only the crunch of footsteps and the whirl of white. Adelina followed close, her hand still in Nakai's, her breath unsteady as the cold bit deeper. His frame cut a path through the storm, his hair streaked with frost, his silence a shelter of its own. She did not know where he was leading her, only that each step carried her farther from her father's cruelty and the town's scorn. Yet safety and fear mingled uneasily, tightening in her chest. She had been abandoned before, and every time it ended in pain. The cabin appeared suddenly from the trees, half buried in drifts, smoke coiling faint from the chimney. He pushed the door open, guiding her inside. Heat and firelight struck her like a shock, stinging her frozen cheeks. The space was small but alive. Animal hides stretched along the walls, herbs hanging from rafters, the low crackle of logs on the hearth. Shadows wavered across the floorboards, bending around a table carved by rough hands. Everything carried the scent of smoke, pine, and something faintly sweet, like cedar oil rubbed into the wood. Nakai stooped to close the door, shutting out the storm. Then he turned to her, his gaze steady, measuring, as though deciding whether she would break in this warmth or mend. He did not touch her again. Instead he moved with unhurried care, lifting a pot from the fire, pouring broth into a clay bowl. He set it on the table, then gestured slowly, pointing to her, to the food, his lips shaping the words with clarity. "Eat." Adelina hesitated. Hunger twisted in her stomach, but shame coiled tighter. She lowered herself into the chair, her damp skirt clinging to her legs. She lifted the spoon, her hand trembling. The broth was simple, wild roots and venison, but the warmth spread instantly, burning her tongue, filling her chest. She felt his eyes on her, not prying, only watching like one might watch a storm cloud. Careful, respectful, waiting to see if it would break or pass. She set the spoon down, her lips pressing thin. Memories of her father's laughter pressed in, the cruel echo of "she's deaf, take her." He had given her away as though she were an unwanted animal. The fire popped, pulling her back. Nakai's shadow leaned across the table, his expression unreadable but not unkind. He pointed to his chest, then shaped his name on his lips. "Nakai." She swallowed, uncertain if he expected her to answer. She raised a hand to her chest, then mouthed softly, haltingly, "Adelina." Her voice caught in her throat, a sound too fragile to carry. Shame prickled. She lowered her eyes. But when she dared glance back, he had not flinched. His mouth curved in the faintest nod, as though her name was a thing worthy of being spoken, however broken. The hours bent gently. He showed her where to place her wet boots near the fire, how to rub warmth back into her hands without burning. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gestures patient enough for her to follow. For the first time in memory, she did not feel the rush of someone's annoyance at her slowness. She began to notice how the room spoke even without sound. The creak of beams when wind pressed against the cabin, the way the fire flared when a log split, the rhythm of Nakai's breath steadying the air. She listened with more than her ears, and the silence became less empty, more alive. Yet fear lingered like a stubborn shadow. What did he mean to do with her? Would he, too, discard her when burden outweighed compassion? She studied him when he was not looking. The scars across his shoulders, the stillness in his movements, the heaviness in his eyes that hinted at grief unspoken. She wondered what losses lived behind that silence. When he sat by the fire, carving wood with a steady hand, she edged closer, curiosity tugging. A small figure emerged beneath his knife, a bird, wings folded, delicate. He set it aside, then drew another from a pouch. She picked it up, feeling the grooves. A woman's face, worn smooth by time. Something tightened in her throat. This was no idle carving. It was memory, held in wood. His wife, perhaps. Someone gone. She set it back carefully, guilt rising like heat in her cheeks. Nakai looked up, his gaze catching hers. For a long moment neither moved. Then he placed the carving gently in the pouch and closed it. His silence said what words could not. Some things remained untouchable, even in kindness. She bowed her head, her heart aching with a strange mix of envy and sorrow. Night deepened. Snow pressed against the windows, muting the world outside. Adelina lay on a bed of furs he had prepared near the hearth. The fire's glow painted the room in soft gold, shadows flickering. She should have felt safe, yet unease gnawed at her. She thought of Martha Dillard's face in the crowd, of Silas Boone's smirk, of whispers that would grow sharper by morning. Already she could see it, the town branding her as ruined, her deafness now bound to the shame of being with a man they scorned. Her eyes burned, though no tears fell. She pulled the fur tighter around her, listening to the muted thrum of the storm outside, to the steady scrape of Nakai's knife on wood. She wanted to ask, "Why did you take me? Why didn't you turn away as others have?" But her mouth remained closed, the words locked where no one had ever wanted to hear them. At last, Nakai set aside his carving. He rose, crossed the room, and paused beside her. She stiffened, fear pressing at her chest. But he only bent low, his voice soft as wind through pine. His lips moved carefully, shaped for her eyes to catch. Here, silence is not emptiness. Her breath caught. She met his gaze and for the first time saw no pity in it, only recognition, as though he too carried silence within him. Something stirred deep inside her, fragile but fierce. She turned her face into the fur, hiding the tremble of her lips, though her heart beat with a rhythm she could not ignore. The fire crackled, casting shadows against the walls. Beyond the door, the storm pressed hard, as if the whole world leaned to listen. And in that fragile stillness, Adelina realized with a shiver that silence itself might become her greatest teacher. Yet as sleep tugged at her eyes, she thought of the town of her father, of the cruel mouths shaping rumors even now. Safety inside these walls was fleeting. Dignity, once stolen, is not easily returned. And when she glanced toward Nakai again, she saw the pouch with the carving of the woman's face. Still there, still watching. A ghost between them, unspoken. Her hand closed around the fur, her breath unsteady. She had been carried into the cabin as shame, but something in her whispered that this place might reshape her. Or break her. The fire dimmed, the shadows deepened, and the question lingered heavy as snow. When dawn came, what would the world demand of her? Morning broke with a brittle clarity, the snow glare so fierce it seemed to blind the town. Word of what had happened spread faster than fire on dry prairie grass. By the time the saloon doors creaked open, and Martha Dillard wrapped her shawl tighter against the cold, the whole settlement was already whispering. The deaf girl, given away, and worse still, taken in by the Apache. Adelina felt those whispers long before she stepped outside again. Even safe inside Nakai's cabin, She could imagine the shapes of their mouths, the curl of disdain, the narrow